think we are here to talk about Palm Beach, the way it is now and the way it has evolved, the way it was. I'm going to ask to our group here to talk about a little bit how they came to Palm Beach, what was their first impression of this place, how that has evolved. I will start maybe talking about my personal experience, just to create a little bit the context for this conversation. Funny enough, I came to Palm Beach because of contemporary art. One of my assignments when I was an editor at Italian Vogue was to interview Julian Schnabel, that had really taken possess, I would say, of a piece of land that is on the what is called today the Billionaire Row, and I think it's where Steve Wynn's house is now. Was this piece of land from the ocean to the lake, and he had like all these huge paintings against like the palms, and he was there like you know, a king painting at his own court with his then wife and his father and his mother, because I think he came to Palm Beach because of that. So that was my first encounter, the first time that I landed in Palm Beach. In that time, I ended up meeting like CC Guest, and then I came back another time, few months later, because we were doing a story on young art dealers, and Jason Rubel had a small gallery on Worth Avenue, I think. I didn't know what Worth Avenue, so I didn't come to Worth Avenue for fashion, but for art, believe it or not. And then again, I was invited to the opening of a show at the Norton. I've met Beth, and Beth has curated something at the Norton. I can't remember exactly what was the show, but I know that was after our Basel Miami, and we all drove up here for this show. Was at night. So my encounter with this town has always been through art, and I end up like, you know, coming here with my husband, David Maupin from Lehman Maupin, that when he opened like a temporary gallery here, and I was called for that, you know, to work on Palmer with my business partner, Michael Berman. So it's always been through art that I get to know this community. So that was my experience. I want to ask Beth probably here, what was her first experience with Palm Beach?
Okay, well there it is. Actually, so I came down when I was probably about 3 years old originally. My grandparents had come down, they hated Miami and they loved Palm Beach. And so they rented a place for a few years, and then they ended up buying this really cool mid-century house on Eden Road that had a kidney-shaped pool that was fed by the ocean. So every time you swam, you had eyes that were, you know, red and irritated, but it was very cool. And my grandfather was one of the early member and founders of the Palm Beach Country Club, which, as you can see there, was like a really cool, again, mid-century, great place, and had Olympic-sized swimming pool, a great snack bar, and you know, a tunnel to the ocean. And of course, they changed it now, so it's not this family place that it was at the time. And my highlight there was going out in the cabana of my grandparents, which was on the second floor and overlooked the first tee, and looking out, and there was this handsome man smiling at me. I was waving at him. It was President John F. Kennedy. And I was 10 years old, which is what I am in that picture. And I was so excited. Now, their family were members of the country club also, because as Catholics, they were not allowed to be a member of the Everglades or any of the other WASPy clubs. So they were invited to join the Palm Beach Country Club. And you know, I really wasn't aware at the time of kind of anti-Semitism until one day my grandmother took me, where I was in the car with her, and she pointed out to the Breakers Hotel, and she said, you know, we're not allowed to stay there. And I said, why not, Grandma? And she said, they don't allow Jews in there. Of Of course, that changed. This is the late 50s. It changed in the 60s, where they have a new owner, and of course...
Not a long time
and
ago.
It's a long time
Not
ago.
a long time ago.
But, Palm Beach at the time was a very kind of sleepy place. It was very, they had those guys in the bicycles, with the baskets to ride you around. There was, Worth Avenue was very elegant with shops like Martha and all the great little shops there, but no chains, of course. And it was, not a lot of art here. I would say, I guess Haran, she had a gallery. Vivian Haran had a gallery here. And there, what? Oh, it's Hope, sorry, it's Grace Hope, yes. And Bruce Helander worked for her. But I, of course, wasn't aware of the art scene at that time. And later, Jason Rubel opened, like in the early 90s, he opened a gallery, which is where the old Gucci store was on Worth Avenue. And I think I was one of maybe 4 people who would go in there and buy art. And then he moved to another location and then finally gave up because the art scene was just, for that kind of thing, maybe you had the older kind of resort art or Finley Gallery, but for contemporary art, it was pretty not existent. And the Norton Museum was a very nice museum, but again, not, had some nice collections, but in contemporary art, it was pretty much non-existent. And then they started to get different directors coming in, and of course now with Glenn, who's here, it's just become fantastic. Hope Alswang helped, build the new the new building, which is such a game changer for the museum. And because the last renovation before that was horrible. So now, of course, with COVID coming in, it really changed the landscape with all the New York galleries coming down, and you had an audience, the town. A friend of my dad's used to say, well, I could live in Miami and be the oldest person, or I could live in Palm Beach and be the youngest person. And that's how it was for so long, but now it's become, an incredible hot place with a mixture of people and art lovers, and that's why we have an UOVO building, which you couldn't have had years ago. So oh wait, am I supposed to show other? Oh, here. So that's a picture of the Palm Beach Country Club with the pool where I learned to swim, and it was great. I used to hang out with Emily Fisher Landau, who had one of the great collections at the beach. And this was, I think, there's my grandfather in a house that they rented before they bought their house. And, me. I can talk about that later.
Robert, tell us, because you also were like quite early here, and you came for very different reason from what I understand. Design, looking for precious things on Dickey Highway.
The truth is that I came here for the first time in 1983. My girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife, lived here, and we came here in the summer when we were on vacation from school. It was the first time a house on the ocean had ever sold for $1 million, if you can imagine that. Like, it was not Yoko Ono and John Lennon's house, but I think it was the one next door. It was the first one. It was like it's like, nothing now, but it was a big deal in 1983. And my life, I agree with Beth, like Palm Beach was a lot sleepier. I think the essence of Palm Beach hasn't changed that much. There's a lot that's the same, and then there's a lot that's different. My life originally, for the first 5 or 6 years, I was in college and just, young person starting on my life, and it was more about the beach and tennis and just having, being able to come down here on the weekends and enjoy Palm Beach for all those kind of fun in the sun sort of things. And then I ended up getting married, and we moved here sort of temporarily, and I was looking for something to do because my career in finance that I thought I was going to do wasn't going to happen here. And I opened a store because I couldn't find anything here to have a house that I wanted. So I started a store, and then a few people came in. It was the same as Jason Rubel. Like, a lot of people came in, not very many people bought anything. But a few people came in, and someone asked me if I could help them with their house. And I didn't necessarily know how to do that, but I said, of course. And that's how I became a designer. It was really, my store was meant to be like a prototype store for like, a design lifestyle store. And I really wanted to like open it all over the country and, grow it and build it. And then I got sidelined by interior design. And then I met my first client in Palm Beach, was a big art collector. And they hired me to do a penthouse apartment, and it was the biggest apartment in Palm Beach at the time. And she had a contemporary art collection, and she wouldn't let me see any of the art, but she said, you can come and see my other houses, but you can't, I don't want you to see anything. I want you to just design this house. It's going to change all the time. And I didn't really know anything about art. So when I discovered it and we started installing it, she had things then that people in Palm Beach didn't do. She had Cindy Sherman and Nan Golden and Lalande. You could buy a Lalande sheep for $5,000 and they could barely sell them. She had, Frank Stella and, all kinds of people like that were just people were not doing stuff like that. Most people were collecting Impressionist or, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, those were my early days in Palm Beach. Oh, and my images have nothing to do with Palm Beach from that time. Yeah, exactly. Oh, right. I was looking back to try to find images from then, and none of them are digitized. So I have to go back into my files and find them all.
Well, Sarah, I heard the word Palm Beach really connected to your gallery so much because from the beginning, I think you had really you were like this lady from Palm Beach. She usually was dressed in pink, and she was carrying this kind of taste of Palm Beach. It was how I think a lot of us got to understand that there was actually an art scene in Palm Beach. Why did you open a gallery here? How did that happen?
Yeah, there was, it's interesting because, first of all, actually, I want to thank UOVO for hosting us and being a supporter of New Wave. It really means a lot to us, and thank you. Yeah. And having UOVO and Palmer and a lot of people help support our artists in residence, which is our main goal, having more artists in our community, so thank you. I had no connection to Palm Beach. I didn't know anybody. I was working at the time at Gagosian, uptown at 980 Madison, and saw very contemporary pictures being shipped here. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I always thought, Palm Beach was the Kennedys and the Reitzmans and this old world kind of. I just didn't think of that. And Miami Basel had just started. I think it was the first year. And I thought, and then I left Gagosian. I was writing for art magazines and then a friend of mine who had a gallery in Berlin was doing an art fair in New York, and she said, will you come and help me? And I said, sure. And then she's like, okay. And I had curated a show for Gavin Brown of early Joe Zucker cotton ball paintings. And she's like, okay, what are you going to do now? You can't keep curating shows for people. And it was a big success. And I said, I think I might open a gallery in Palm Beach. And she was from Berlin. I don't think she had any idea what Palm Beach was. And she's like, you have to do it. She became obsessed. Every day at the fair, she'd be like, have you made your plan? What are you doing? And I was just like, whoa. And, but I knew, and then Steve Henry said, well, if you're going to do that, you have to meet Beth. I knew who Beth was, but I didn't know her, and I came down to look at spaces, and Beth had friends for dinner, other collectors, and then out of the blue, I got asked to co-curate a show at what used to be the Palm Beach ICA with Dominic Malone, who's a curator. He was at the MCA Chicago at that time. And he said, I know you're doing freelance, the show at Gavin's, and you're writing. Do you want to co-curate the show with me? They asked me to do it. I can't leave my position at the, at Chicago but we could do it together. And I said, this is really weird because I've been looking at maybe opening a gallery there. And so that afforded me the opportunity to come here and have it for a gig and keep doing that research. And we did a show in November of 2004, it opened, and great show at the ICA. And then a year later, I opened this show with Wade Guyton at 3300 South Dixie Highway in a storefront.
Wow.
I didn't realize until I forgot, or maybe I didn't. Scott Rothkopf from the Whitney came down to see the show. And then when he was doing research for Wade's show, 15 years later, 10 years later, he said, you gave Wade his first solo show in the United States. And I was like, oh, right. I said, on the Dixie Highway. In West Palm Beach on the Dixie Highway, yeah. And and then did a Marilyn Minter show before Marilyn had a gallery in New York. It was one of the main also other reasons I wanted to come here, besides there wasn't a gallery, and I thought, why isn't there a real gallery when there's such affluence and there are collectors who might not know Wade Guyton or Marilyn Minter, but they've been doing this a long time, so they will recognize what this is. It was affordable. I had no money, no family money, no backer, no resources. I had whatever I had made a pittance putting together freelance gigs to start this gallery, and I could not do that in New York. And so this was a really inexpensive storefront, and that's how I got my start. And
Wow.
and it's really
Wow.
But by the way, similar to Jason, and I've talked to Don and Mira and Jason about this. He was way too early. Art fairs, Miami Basel, the internet have changed the business of buying art, right? Mm-hmm. And he was kind of too early, and I've talked to him about that. But I think even 20 years ago when I opened the show, it was a handful of people, right? Who, there's the Fosters and Beth and people in this room who they'll go anywhere when they know there's good art. They can sniff it. They'll go to a strange studio way out far, and so those people quickly found me, which is really interesting.
Also, the Rubels weren't who they are now. They were very early in their career as these massive collectors, and people were like, I remember Jason, the whole thing. People were like, who are these people?
Yeah, right.
What are they doing here?
Right. But
it was a very specific moment when even Miami didn't have really an art scene.
No,
I
exactly.
remember going there, before Art Basel
but
started.
I also,
It was a real,
very different,
cultural desert. There was nothing.
And there was no contemporary art curator at the Norton.
No.
I had presented them to the photography curator at the time, the last full set of the black and white photographs that Marilyn Minter did of her mother, that really iconic.
Yeah.
And they said, no, I don't think so. And then Beth got it. But it was, and I remember when Guilan got here and we had lunch, he's like, it's amazing here. And I said, well, now it is. But it was, even 20 years ago, it was tough.
But I think it's still tough. I asked Dylan actually about this because, a lot of people came and left. And we can talk about this. But Dylan, how did you decide to actually spend and even have somehow a family here? How did you arrive to Palm Beach? Because that was not your...
The easiest way to describe why I'm here, maybe as a younger person, is the way that I feel about New York City is it's a mecca for art. It's undoubtedly the mecca. It's the best place to have a gallery. But at the same time, there's a lot of oversaturation there, and there's a lot of competition. So, I found myself after, over a decade of working in art there, that next sort of step, or what used to be the next step, I would argue it's no longer the step. Originally you would find a mentor, and very similar to what Sarah did by working at Uptown with Gagosian, and eventually you would go off and make your own program. That was kind of the way things were originally done. That was the way that I was trained. But it began to feel kind of unfeasible because of the operating costs and the competition, and it felt like there was less of a lack of collaboration. And Palm Beach felt like this incredible opportunity where there was a lot more collaboration. The community was much smaller, but there was a lot more curatorial possibilities. So for someone like me that's really interested in history and kind of wants to, dance to my own beat, I was like, wow, this is like a really, really interesting place. And oh my God, it's sunny, and oh, there's a beach, and like, oh, ooh, ah. There's all these really attractive things about Palm Beach that I feel like brings us all here. You could be into tennis, you can be into golf, I don't know, you could be into bike riding. I mean, you could just be into, frankly, flowers. I mean, there's so many incredible things about, I believe, Florida State. Even if you go more inland, there's just such great natural beauty. So I think there's a lot of reasons why people come here. But really, for me, at the end of the day, I felt like it was a place where I could be myself and be a gallerist in a different way that I couldn't be in New York City. And quite frankly, LA was just too far for me. But quickly, I just want to acknowledge how incredible these stories that we're hearing are. I mean, to hear, Stefano talk about Julian Schnabel in the late 80s, early 90s working here, I heard those stories too, kind of in passing, and to hear that you were also hearing about those stories. And I've, looked at David Saleh drawings that have the Jason Rubel sticker on the back of them, and have heard whispers about that show and what that had looked like. And I've been dying to talk to Jason Rubel and be like, what was it like, And of course, to hear Sarah's story, and my God, I mean, to do your first show as Wade Guyton, and it's just incredible. And Robert's story, and of course Beth's story, it's just amazing. And I think that's one other thing that I want to highlight about Palm Beach is there is a fantastic community here, and there is a DNA of history. And the more that it's mined, the more exciting. I mean, it could be, oh, this is an old one that I made. But yeah, I mean, even if you just look at the mid-century design here, this is a Durrell Stone building that's on South Ocean Boulevard. And there's just all this funky mid-century here. Oh yeah, that's the cleaners on the island. I don't know if you guys know Tropical Cleaners, but that's your cleaners? Oh, it's my favorite building ever.
Well, I think that was something that seduced, I think, Beth to be here in a certain way, because she had many choices about where you could bring your collection. You have been a collector from 1959, we find out.
69,
I don't know.
69.
69, okay. I thought that was a little too far. But Beth, you had so many choices.
But not art. No, but it's so funny because I love architecture and collecting. Even before art, I was collecting stuff and baseball cards. So I probably was collecting in 59 as a kid. But you were showing some of the buildings there, these curved buildings there, and those mostly were by a guy named Howard Chilton. Well, I'm not going to get to me yet, but yeah, so here. So Howard Chilton actually designed my house in West Palm, which is this one. There's the bunker. But it's so funny because I was staying with my dad in a house that he and his wife had built in Palm Beach. And one time I was there at Christmas time with my kids, and my brother was there with his kids, and my poor son and his friend had to sleep in the lounge chairs by the pool because there was no room. And my son looked at me, he goes, "Mom, it's time you got your own place." And so I started looking around. I wanted to be on the water, and of course, Palm Beach had gotten too expensive. So I started looking in West Palm, and I ended up on Flagler and on the Intercoastal, North Flagler. And I bought a house that had been developed by the Frisbees. They had built I guess they had gotten a property and divided it into 2 houses for he and his brother. And the first one I looked at, I found out was already in contract with Dan Ponton of Club Colette. And so the house next to it I could get. I ended up getting that, and then the property next to it that had a very junky little house, which I took down. And then 4 years later, we're talking about 2000. So 4 years later, I bought this mid-century house on the other side, which I had been eyeing, and I asked the woman to give me a first right of refusal. And I said to her, I'm going to renovate this house. I'm not going to tear it down. And I don't think she believed me until it was written in Palm Beach Cottages and Gardens. It became the Idea House. And I sent her she had moved to North Carolina. I sent her the magazine, and then she came to visit. And it was designed by this guy, Howard Chilton, who had done all the curved buildings in Palm Beach. And the weird, funny story is my best friend, Joanne Casulo, when she was a kid, her parents were fisher people or whatever, they fished. They had a house on Singer Island, which they built in the early 60s, and it was very Japanese style. And it was built by this guy, an architect, named Hap Lewis. And he was still alive when Joanne started to come and stay with me, and she said, "Can I have Hap and his wife over?" And I said, "Sure." So he comes over, he looks at my house, he goes, "I designed this house." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, I worked for Howard Chilton." And Howard Chilton liked to go fishing, and he never really did any work. So I did it with a colleague, and I pulled out the old plans, and it was just so amazing to find the person who had designed the house. And it was designed for the daughter of the Rich's ice cream person. And now I come to find this whole neighborhood, it's called Northwood, and my area is Northwood Shores, that has this incredible history. And Jared's there, who lives there. And it was originally an area called Mangonia. And Mangonia was started in 1895 by this Reverend Gales. And my house was actually landfill, the bunch of it, but there was a point called Gales Point where they made boats. They had a whole town with a general store, a little hospital, school, a church, and they have historic markers. They now have a map where you can trace out all the original buildings in the area. And you start learning about these neighborhoods, which is unbelievable. And Northwood Street has these incredible stores and restaurants, and it was always a black neighborhood called Pleasant City, that area. And there's books on that too. And I just love it. And when I first moved there in 2000, people who I knew from Palm Beach were like, "Oh my God, you're so brave to live there." And now they all say to me, "Oh, you're so smart to live there."
Yes,
you can't believe what's going on, development and everything happening there. But it's so great. And of course, I have great view of Palm Beach. And
yeah, you were really one of the first to see what West Palm Beach would have become. And but what I'm very curious to know is, why did you decide to bring your collection and open the bunker here? You had a house in Montecito. You spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. You had your
Palm Beach came before Montecito or LA, but it was because, first of all, there are no earthquakes here, and real estate's too expensive in New York. And I spent more and more time here, and my friend Bert Minkoff, who's a broker, came to me. I had things in storage, and he said to me, "This building is available, and you can do like storage here, and you can show your art." And I bought it in 2017, and it was an old candy factory, and had become toy factory, and then it became a Bullet Factory, and it went back. And anyway, it's such a great Art Deco building, and it took 2 years to renovate. And of course, we store a little tiny bit there, but really can't really store and show. So we've made it mostly an art showing. And I just wanted a place for people to come enjoy the art and see the art. And community was growing as an art center, and I thought it would be a great
epicenter for these,
but
for
also
what was happening.
a connection to the Norton and someplace else for people to go look at art.
Yeah.
And it's just grown in popularity, and we change the shows every year, and Maynard Monroe, who's here, is one of our original curators with Laura Migden, and we have guest curators, and every year we have these thematic shows, and it's so much fun, and it's nice to get the work out of the warehouses. And so, and the weather is great, and we open it from early December or it opens really by Thanksgiving to May, and then we change out the shows. So it's...
Yeah, I mean, I think you were really like at the forefront of this movement,
Yeah.
because many people say that was during the pandemic that Palm Beach became like this art center, but really things were happening much before.
Yeah. Oh,
like
yeah.
I think 2015, 2017, I know I heard a lot about that. What do you think drove that growth? Because you saw it happening
showing
under
some
your
shows.
eyes. Yes.
Me?
Yes, sure,
dro-
Sarah, you are like...
You know, it's interesting. I started noticing, so I had moved from Dixie over. Jane Holzer was a supporter of the gallery, early collector, and she said, I want you to, it was 2008 and the market had crashed, and she said, I want you to move over into one of my spaces. And I said, Jane, I'm on Dixie Highway. I can't afford Worth Avenue. And she said, oh, we'll work it out. Don't worry. And so for those of you who go to Bill Bouquet, the second floor where the private dining is, this was my gallery.
Oh, wow.
And so this was my Simone Lee show that I did. And I was there, and then I started to notice in about 2015, 16, younger financial bank, hedge fund family guys and families coming down, setting up offices. And they would come in, and they'd been collecting art in New York. So they were very well informed, and I started to notice that little shift, and that kept growing. So, with remote work, people could work from wherever, and it was growing down here, and taxes, and the hedge fund, all these private banks setting up offices. That's when I started to notice that growth. And that had been building, and then COVID happened, and it just accelerated. And, it's also... The Norton had a contemporary curator who did incredible shows, Cheryl Brut-Van, and this is I was going to show. This is the old entrance of the Norton, of the lobby, and this was Rob Wynn, and you can see at the top it says, "I remember ceramic castles, Japanese bridges," and you might recognize that. That is the beginning of the staircase in the Norman Foster wing, and the museum bought that for their collection. And when they went to do the expansion, Cheryl and Hope had this idea to have Rob take that text and incorporate it in the staircase, and so we did that, and I think it's a great. And then this is Jose Alvarez, who's here, and this was his. This is, again, the old entrance lobby of the museum, one of his beautiful wallpaper murals. So I think that,
That's when I would say the institutions and the private gallery came together.
Yeah.
And for the first time, there was a real art movement.
Yeah, they became
happening.
like a community. And I think, and it's great. Eleanor's here, and Aquavella, and you know, it
So
was
many
really,
galleries.
so,
yes,
and I was so
open.
excited, you know, for so many years being here, you know, and to have colleagues come down, and Paula Cooper and David and, you know, Steve Henry and Dylan, and it's really
Pace, yes,
Pace,
so
and
many.
yeah, and it's really, you want that as a dealer. I want, you know, so it was really great for a while, and some people have stayed and continuing to be a part of the community, and I think, you know, I think that's for me something, you know, and also in starting New Wave and having artists here. You know, we always, Beth and I always talk about in collectors, it's great, it's a great collecting community, but, you know, we're missing artists. And whenever I had artists come down for their shows, I mean, Wade said that to me when he had his show. He said, you know, you should have an artist in residence program here. Artists would love to come here. And, you know, it's, I think having artists in our community just enriches it so much. And the Norton has a great residency program. And, you know, if we could have more of that, you know, around would be great. And, you know, when Eleanor or Dylan have artists come down, it's great. I think it'll just continue to grow, I hope.
Yeah, I think there are like some incredible also collection that are behind closed doors, and I always feel like, what can we do to open up these doors? Your family, Dylan, has a fantastic space in New York and in Connecticut. Do you think there is any chance to have something happening here? I mean, I had the pleasure to visit, you know, your father Peter's and Stephanie's mansion, and really the art is incredible, and I wish that they could share some of that with us.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question. But, you know, I think sort of, you know, very similar to, you know, Beth and what Beth has done and, you know, what's happening at the Norton Museum, you know, I think what it's about for those collections to be opened up is to give those collectors like my father an opportunity to also show their collection in spaces like the Norton, and also, you know, to Beth's credit, and I guess to Bert's credit to some degree, you know, show them that, look, you know, you can take these spaces, you can make a foundation here, it's beneficial, you can use it as storage, and, you know, there is an audience here that wants to see work, and they want to see what you have. You know, in some ways, I think of what's happening in Palm Beach, and I think back to Miami during like the early Miami Basel years, and I was always told that there was a lot of visits. You know, people would open up their doors to the community, and different collectors would allow people to come and see their collections and try to engage people. That, if anything, I see as the one big challenge right now.
Yeah, because it is, you know, and Robert, you can tell us about that. It is an ecosystem. As much as you can show, you also will acquire to show. And it's kind of, and you create a larger and larger community. That's what happened, I think, in design, and I think you advise a lot of collectors here. Do you ever push them?
Well, I think I first started coming here in the 80s, and Palm Beach was a resort community in the 80s. For a lot of people, they came at Christmas and left by April 15th. Some people didn't even come until January. They were here for a couple of months. Of course, there were people who lived here year-round, but not a lot. It was sleepy, it was quiet, and it had like 2 or 3 big months. And over the course of, and also West Palm Beach was a shanty town. Literally, like there were no big buildings. It was very run down, and it has transformed itself in terms of redevelopment and growth and expansion, and I don't know how many hundreds of thousands more people live here, but it's a lot. It's, you know, it was so different. And then Palm Beach is the same. I mean, they now live here, and it's a year-round community, and people are committed to the community. And I think with private collectors, you know, it's the same thing in publishing. Like, you know, people don't want to open up their houses to publish them because they're private and they don't want people to know. And I think it takes time to develop that. And I think as Palm Beach continues to flourish and grow, led by the example of Beth, maybe Dylan will somehow do it with his family or whatever, people putting themselves out there and also committed to the community, because your dad, your family has places in New York and in Connecticut where they do stuff, and they do it beautifully and incredibly. So maybe one day he'll wake up and decide to do it here.
You
Who
know,
knows?
It's actually really funny. I completely spaced. I actually have a couple slides that are examples of that very thing happening, which is so typical me. Yeah, I'm comic cleaners. Okay, so here we go. So this is an example of why I like Palm Beach so much, right? So, you know, my space is on the second floor in Worth Avenue, and my rent isn't very high. By my rent not being very high, I basically can do whatever I want, right? So, you know, for many years I had this idea of doing an exhibition with Karen Klimnick's work and my mother Stephanie's dress collection, which at that point had really never been seen. You know, through, I guess, my father's encouragement, who was a very big Karen Klimnick collector, he was like, look, I love the idea. You really need to get the best Karen Klimnicks you possibly can. I'll give you all of my best Karen Klimnicks for the show as loan, and you can take your mother's dress collection. Anyways, this is all private collection. Every single work you're seeing here is private collection, okay? Took forever to put together. That led to a show at the NSU Museum at the Fort Lauderdale that Bonnie Clearwater generously picked up and elaborated on that. So there's more dresses now, there's more paintings, fantastic. We also did something very similar with Rosa de la Cruz here, which was wonderful. Rosa generously loaned us her Felix Gonzalez Torres piece. And we had this crazy idea with Jorge Pardo where we wanted to kind of make a river with the candy, and we wanted it to transform every week, you know, so, and I told Jorge when he was like, what works do you want to have in the show? And I said, I just want the right work for the show. And he's like, well, you know, Lever House in New York City, the Lever House collection, which is actually, you know, A.B. Rosen's collection, has the perfect pieces for this. You should get that loan. So I guess my point is, you know, I think Palm Beach, you were talking about opening up collections. You can do that in Palm Beach in ways that you can't in other places because there's a lower operating expense. You know, so I can have these quirky ideas and I can go to these collectors and there's an openness where they'll say, yeah, we'll show that here.
Like
Well, that's a very, very, I think, interesting and also useful kind of way of thinking of what can be done, because, you know, somehow Palm Beach has also become a little bit a victim of its own success. That's why somehow so many art gallery has been pushed out of Worth Avenue and of like the Royal Poinciana to give more space to chain of retail stores. So hearing like, you know, Dylan, your approach to this, it's really like give us hope and actually almost like a blueprint of what can be done. And I think there is a lot of space also in West Palm Beach where things are happening. Beth was there very early on, but you also have a space now that you operate in West Palm Beach. Tell me a little bit about that, how you all lived this passage, you know, this change in the geography of art in Palm Beach.
I think it's great that things are expanding into West Palm, and this whole kind of corridor of, you know, from the Norton Museum, and then we have the gallery community, really and Jill Bernstein has her collection there, and there's galleries, there's design. Robert and I have this project at the Ann Norton Sculpture Garden. Today's the last day. That's been an amazing, tomorrow's the last day. It's been a great collaboration and an incredible historic home and garden and studio of a woman artist. It's unbelievable. Such a jewel.
Everyone should go if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's an
It's a
amazing.
great exhibition.
Yeah, amazing to have this woman's historic studio in our community, and then to the bunker. And I think that, we all went over to Dixie Highway. I mean, I started my gallery there, but it was always, all the design shops and the diners, and, but now it's really, I feel like it used to be people were like, well, I'm not going to come across the bridge to see your gallery.
Yeah, but
And I'm like, yeah.
I think there is
And
a real
it's-
tradition. The Norton, for some reason, was built in West Palm Beach. I think.
Yeah, well, because
Well,
they
as the
lived over
first
there.
And all the
museum.
great restaurants are opening in West
Yeah.
Palm.
And
And
I-
also, I went to a new gallery down in Lake Worth called MTN.
Mountain Gallery, they're great. They're
Which
right,
is
and they're in
really
Lake
great.
Worth. Yeah.
And I'm sad about the, ICA, where she talked about starting, because that used to be this incredible art place that Michael Rush curated. It was owned by Bob Montgomery. It had been the Lannan Foundation building. Now it's the Cultural Center. But it was just amazing, the shows that went on there.
But I think now it was, yeah, and it's what's interesting is I feel like now, when it was like, I'm not going across the bridge, I feel like it's one big community. That you're going over the bridge and back, and it's like, it's not a separation anymore. And it's interesting, I've been thinking about this, like when I go over down to Lake Worth, how, Northwood, Lake Worth, how this is all going to develop. It's going to be really exciting to see.
I'm sure we all should say thank you to our president for making that
For
necessary
having to go over
every
the
day,
bridge.
as we all have to cross a lot of bridges to connect the north to the south, right?
Yeah, let's do.
Yes, we can open to questions, absolutely.
Anybody have any questions? Maynard has a question.
I was just going to say, you mentioned
Tracy has a. Tracy, oh.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll make more. Yeah, no, we did that. Tracy was talking. Tracy is an amazing docent at the bunker. If anybody's had the honor of a tour there with her, the map came about because we had when all the galleries were here for New Wave, and they were also sponsors and supporting the Artist in Residence program. And so I said, let's make this map to show kind of where everyone is, so people who come up for the weekend. And then we made one this year, and I left them at the bunker, and I said, hand these out to people, because Aquavella's on it, and the Norton, and the galleries on Florida Avenue, and I forget, all the public art. We have also in our community, which wasn't the case, unbelievable, world-class, world-known artists making public art pieces in City Place. And so we had all of those on the map, and they've had, I guess you just ran out, which is great. That means they're handing them out to people. But I think it is something after we did the first one and we opened it, I was like, wow, look at what's going on here. I mean, just seeing it on that map, it was very exciting.
I mean, certainly like all the public art that has been happening in West Palm Beach, I think put like art at the center of the conversation. The fact that people have to drive by the work of Fred, of the work of other artists every day, make them think about like the importance of art, but where and how they can go deeper, and which galleries and which museum spaces are in the community, in the area. So public art has this very strong function. And there is a big tradition, again, going back to the Norton and to the sculpture garden at the Norton. You have been very involved with that and the public program here.
No, Sibyl does the public
Sure,
art, but I did, it's funny, I just remembered this, but 15 years ago, they asked me to be on the public art committee, right? And I went to the first meeting, and I was the only art person. It was all, I guess, county and state officials, and so it was like, okay, first slide. This is an image of a fountain with some lights, and I was like, okay. And then the next one was a statue of a person on a horse, like very traditional. And then the next one was just some benches. And I raised my hand. I said, I just have a question. Is it important or necessary that it's actually art? Because none of what we have looked at, except for the sculpture, is art. And maybe I'm not the right person for that. I was just like, I couldn't believe what they were considering spending money on. It had nothing to do with art. It was just to fulfill their percent for art requirement. So they were like, we'll get a landscape designer to pour some concrete benches and that'll be the art. And it was awful. And so 15 years later, we have this incredible public art here. I mean, it's a really big, steep curve
education program that I think goes with
I think it's, it's the traditional building of a community and the evolution, and it is the trailblazers, like the people here, who step up. Beth put her money behind it in her collection, and other people are doing it, and people will continue. The developers, even if it's, in their best interest to do it, they're still commissioning this artwork that's around, and it encourages other people to do it and lead the way. And Palm Beach really has changed into Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, being a community that's intertwined, because it really was. It really was segregated. Like, it literally was. You didn't go over the bridge.
And if I can prize you,
not much.
What you did with the Elizabeth Norton Sculpture Garden is also the connection to the design world, because Norton, yeah. Elizabeth Norton is in the Hamptons. I remember that. It's like the connection to the design world, because there is also a great tradition of architecture and design, and there is like such a strong design community, but somehow I don't think we never have gone with the art to Georgia and to all those stores that are so important in defining the taste of this town. And that's really like great connection that you highlighted in that show. I
think that's what we wanted to do. Is there aren't that many people doing kind of like what we do, and we wanted to show like this exists here. There are collectors who are collecting these things, commissioning these kinds of interiors, and so, and Palm Beach. And also, when I started in the late 80s with my first store, it was 100%. I was around the same time as Jason, and people looked and they're like, oh, that's nice, and they walked out. So, that still exists also, but it's a lot less.
I see a lot of that in the work of Dylan, of connecting, the world of design, the world of object, fashion, with the world of contemporary art.
I think the season is definitely expanded, and a lot of people are year-round. I mean, we close just because we have to deinstall and reinstall. Otherwise, I would definitely stay open all the time, because people are in here, and a lot of Europeans actually come to Florida in the summer. So, I don't know. And this is great dealers from LA who are here, Adam Moskowitz, Meredith Bays, who have a great gallery, and it helped Jill Bernstein, who has an incredible new space of her collection, and one of the great collectors down here. And, so I look out here and I see amazing artists, collectors, curators. Lauren Richmond from the Norton is here. Sabia does the public art. John Welter, who helps me at the bunker. I mean, there's just a lot of people here who are so involved in the art world. And I think the seasons are long, but a lot of places close up because a lot of people leave when it starts getting really hot, so.
But it's also changed a lot, again, since when I started in the 80s. I mean, a lot of houses were not even necessarily climatized for year-round. They were really, they didn't have air conditioning, and they weren't built to be year-round houses, and they literally got closed up for the summer. And now everyone's
well, let me
building
ask
for
Eleanor from Aquavella Gallery, do you close up or do you not close up? All year round, right? There you go.
I'm sorry.
And,
But what I...
if I can add, few, even with our Palmer, we started with like 1 or 2 issues through the season, and then now we are just adding like a 3rd issue that will be out like in May. So we think that there is really a larger community that find Palm Beach as the center of their lives. Sure, they all take travel like everybody else. You like to spend, a month like maybe in the Hamptons or in Aspen or in Europe, but that's kind of what happened also in New York, technically. Yeah. So I think more and more people are finding like a space in Palm Beach that they can call home.
No, I think it's more year-round, but people do leave. We don't do exhibitions in the summer. Maybe we have a group show up, but when I had to be open 7 days a week, every day, we were open. But yeah, it has become more expanded.
Yeah, I think there is a lesson that comes also from what we have seen happen in Miami as a city, as a community that is really like a 12 months a year, like community. Sure, there are months when there are more people, more Europeans, more like Americans, but it is something that can be a model. Also, when it comes to collecting art, I think we have a lot to learn also from what happened in Miami, because a lot of collectors were able to open their houses and create, the Rubels. At the end, it's been like a very important example of how you can share what is your art, and sure, I think have been very influential in teaching us how to make art part of everyday's life.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. We actually, New Wave has artists in residence all year round. And we had an artist last year from LA who wanted to be here in the summer, even though we said there's not many people, and it's very important mentoring, having collectors and the curators come to the studio, and she said, that's okay. She wanted to be, and then what we've initiated, and this will be our first year, is we're gonna have a graduating student from Dreyfus who will be the New Wave artist in resident before they go to their undergraduate art program. So we're in the process of finding our first artist in Dreyfus High School graduate as our artist in residence for the summer. So we're going to start that this year, which is great. Yeah.
So I just want to give a nepotistic shout out to my daughter, Kyle, who's here, yay. Kyle is is the guest curator and co-curator at the Bunker this year, this beautiful show. And so I want to invite any one of you who haven't been to see the shows, please come. And there's a website you can go on and make an appointment, or you can reach out to me or whomever. And yes.
Oh, Jose has a question. Amazing, and probably the first solo show and maybe only of a Venezuelan artist at the Norton, maybe, yeah. That's great.
Well, are there any other questions from? So I just want to thank, my panelists here, and especially, because we are all in this mission to also change what is the perception of Palm Beach. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, I'm a European, but I keep thinking, so many people associate Palm Beach with, sure, a beautiful place, but also the land of very old ideas, a bastion of conservatorism. When you read about Palm Beach in the New York Times, usually it's something very unpleasant. And I would say that it's so important for us to bring this message out there. This is a place where art is happening, where there are some people doing a great job with galleries, with private institutions, in design, and that's really the message that we have to bring out. So thank you for joining us.